Hello, and welcome back to CoValue App Tutorial. Let's move on to What's Your Value and PE, the submodule in the Perception module. This module is primarily used to value banking, finance, and insurance companies. The module uses discounted future earnings model to value stocks. With What's Your Value and Price Earnings module, you can arrive at the equity value of a stock and the future price earnings of a stock based on the assumptions of earnings growth and the cost of equity estimated for the forecast period and terminal period. Here, we create a valuation plan for American Express from the World Data Bank. We can change country data bank to the respective country or exchange where the stock is listed. Here, we change data bank country from India to USA and select American Express to value and proceed after naming the plan as on the day it was created. This example is just an illustration for the tutorial to understand the working of the app. Let's name this plan as on the date of undertaking this valuation, that is 17th December 2022. On importing this from DataBank, all the historic information, macro information, analytics, number of outstanding shares, and computation of cost of equity is pre-filled into the app for the respective company. The data pre-filled is classified, and the user does not have to look or classify any data. This process assists the user to conduct speedier valuations. As you can see, information like company name, prior period, currency, number scale, and risk fee rate are pre-filled in the app. The prior period is usually the previous period ended for which the information is available. Currency is in US dollars. Figures are in millions or billions and are set by default. The forecast period can range between 1 to 99 years, depending on longevity of the business, brand value, its economic moat, the industry scenario, etc. For American Express, we take a 5-year forecast period. The assumptions entered in this and following screens are for the forecast period. There is a separate screen for terminal period assumptions. For risk-free rate, the latest 10-year Treasury bond yield is pre-filled at 3.49%, but is open for edit. The user may click the history icon to check the date and yield. You will need to enter the expected inflation rate expected during the forecast period. Ensure that the risk-free rate is greater than the expected inflation rate, as generally the Treasury rate incorporates the expected inflation rate. The user may click the history icon to check the history and CAGR of inflation. Here, we take 3.25% as the expected inflation rate during the forecast period. Ensure that the changes, if any made, in the inflation rate needs to be reflected in the computation of cost of equity. You can click the history icon for historical data and analytics for the company. Users can also click the tooltips icon for information and clarity for using the app. You will now need to save and continue to move on to the next screen. Advancing to the earnings growth screen. Net income is pre-filled in the screen. Users can also click the tooltips icon for information and clarity for using the app. History icon on the top right of the screen can be referred to for historical data of growth in earnings. Users can enter the earnings for the forecast period as values or as growth percentage. Users can opt for, quote, autofill after function to expedite the process. For American Express, we take a 3% net income growth for the year 2023 and 2024 and 8% CAGR for 2025 to 2027. Advancing to the cost of equity screen. Enter the cost of equity during the forecast period. Users need to refer the history icon to view computation under capital asset pricing model in the user input column. In the dynamic column of this section, you can iterate and compute the cost of equity based on your assumptions and enter the cost of equity. You can either enter the cost of equity for the forecasted years individually, or you can use autofill to ease the process. Do review the beta with other websites. Users can also deploy other models or just use expected market return, which is an implicit rate of return the investors expect in the stock market. The terminal period is the final screen in the What's Your Value and PE module. The earnings of the company continue post the forecast period and thus have value. Terminal period assumptions helps to forecast the earnings into perpetuity. In this screen, you need to enter your cost of equity and terminal growth assumptions. You will need to enter the expected inflation rate expected during the terminal period. The user may click the history icon to check the history and CAGR of inflation for the currency for up to 30 years. Here, we take 2% as the expected inflation rate during the terminal period. Ensure that the risk-free rate is greater than the expected inflation rate, as generally the Treasury yields should incorporate the expected inflation rate. Here, we take 2.25% as the risk-free rate during the terminal period. This is assumed as inflation of 2% plus real interest rate of 0.25%. Enter the cost of equity during the terminal period. Users need to refer the history icon to view computation under capital asset pricing model in the user input column. In the dynamic column of this section, you can iterate and compute the cost of equity based on your assumptions and enter the cost of equity. Do review the beta with other websites. Users can also deploy other models or just use expected market return, which is an implicit rate of return the investors expect in the stock market. The cost of equity for American Express is computed at 9.50% as computed by the app. Before you enter the terminal growth assumptions, you will need to be clear how you want the earnings to grow. If you expect the earnings to grow at terminal growth rate, then enter the inflationary growth and real growth assumptions. Or, if you want the earnings to grow at expected inflation rate, then enter only the inflationary growth, then enter real growth assumptions as 0. Or, if you want the earnings to remain constant, then enter 0 for both inflationary growth and real growth. The inflationary growth should be in line with the inflation rate assumed during the terminal period. This essentially is the pricing power of the company and its ability to keep up with inflation. The user may click the history icon to check the history and CAGR of inflation for the currency for up to 30 years, and also refer to the inflation entered during the terminal period. Here, we assume American Express inflationary growth will be 2%, which is as per the expectations entered during the terminal period. The real growth expected into perpetuity should take into account the country GDP growth rate, industry growth rate, and the world GDP growth rate. The user may click the history icon to check the history and check the CAGR of GDP growth for the country and the world for up to 60 years. Here, we assume American Express real growth in earnings to be 2%. You will need to ensure that the terminal growth is not greater than the cost of equity of the company. Now users can view the equity valuation, equity value per share, and 1-year PE forward computations on the screen. The equity value per share for American Express is $197 and its 1-year PE forward is 18.86 based on assumptions entered. Users can also click and view the PE report on the screen. In the report, do not forget to check out the future value per share. The present value per share is compounded by the cost of equity to arrive at the future value per share. Users can email the reports from here and share the valuation plan with subscribers and non-subscribers in the app format. The card displays in the module screen displays a summary of latest 10 completed valuations. On click of the card, the user can edit the valuation, directly go to Show Report, create a new plan using existing data, or delete this valuation plan. Thank you.